week's installment of First Pages. Today we're going to be reading Urban Outlaws by Peter J. Black. This book is the first book in a series, and this one is called Blackout. So let's read the blurb. A lethal computer virus has been unleashed, and the only ones who could stop it are the urban outlaws. Deep beneath the city live 5 extraordinary kids with a mission to right the wrongs of society. Jack, Charlie, Link, Obi, and Ren have gadgets, guts, and guile to outsmart their enemies. They are orphans living off of the grid. Most people don't know they exist, but when the world's most destructive computer virus escapes into cyberspace, it threatens to destroy everything the urban outlaws have worked for. The virus could shut down national security and reveal their bunker's secret location. They must contain the virus before it's too late. Enter Hector, an insanely talented hacker who could be the key to destroying the virus, except that the leader, Jack, has no idea if they can trust him. Risk could mean winning big or losing everything. The urban outlaws return for a second adventure filled with cutting-edge technology and thrilling adversity ashing. So actually, this is the second book in the series. I was mistaken, but yep, we will be reading the first pages. Chapter 1. Jack Fenton sat on the pavement next to Charlie. He shivered and pulled a dirty blanket up to his neck. They were opposite an apartment building near Hyde Park, London. On the ground floor, through a set of glass doors, they could make out a concierge sitting behind a desk, reading a magazine. There was a clock on the wall above his head, and his second hand seemed to be moving way too fast. "They're an hour late," Jack whispered into the microphone on the headset. "If they're any later, we'll have to—" "Relax," a voice said into his ear. "It'll be fine." I'll be back at their headquarters, surrounded by sophisticated computers that could tap to closed-circuit television systems around London. "What if they don't deliver it?" "They will." Jack sighed. This was a special mission they were doing for Obi, and they couldn't let him down. Obi used to live in the apartment building, so he was the right person to guide them through the next half hour or so. But Jack felt uneasy about it. He was used to being in control. "What if they deliver it to the wrong place?" he said. "They won't." "How do you know?" Jack glanced at Charlie. "Wait, do you realize we have no way to—" Charlie's bright green eyes widened, and she pointed at the delivery van as it turned down her breath. "Thank God." "Told you so," Obi said. "Get ready." The van stopped in the front of the apartment building's entrance, and the driver hopped out. He walked to the back of the van, whistling as he went, and threw open the doors. Charlie unzipped her backpack and took out a device shaped like a satellite dish. Only this was a lot smaller. It was one of her homemade gadgets, a directional microphone, able to pick up the faintest whisper from 100 yards away. She connected it to her headset so they could all hear. Jack pressed a pair of mini binoculars to his eyes. With a lot of running, he loaded a box onto a hand truck and wheeled to the glass doors. He pressed the buzzer. The concierge lowered his magazine. The delivery driver nodded at the box. After a few more seconds' hesitation, the concierge typed a code into the keypad on his desk. Jack closed his eyes and listened to the tones the keypad made in his headset. When he opened them again, the delivery driver was wheeling the box across the foyer. "Did you get it?" Obi said. "Yeah," just keeping his attention on the building across the street. The concierge stepped around the desk, scratching his head. Charlie adjusted the directional microphone, and his voice came through their earpieces. Bit late for a delivery, isn't it? Last one of the day, the delivery driver said. Who's it for? The concierge asked. The delivery driver set the box down and checked the details on his mobile computer. Paul McCartney. He held it out for the concierge to sign. The concierge's eyes rose. The Paul McCartney? He said. The guy from the Beatles? The delivery driver shrugged. I don't know. Jack looked at Charlie and rolled his eyes, while Obie snickered in their ears. The concierge crossed his arms. There's no one here with that name. You'll have to take it back. Not likely, Trevor said. The address is right. See for yourself. The concierge didn't move. Look, buddy, just sign it, please. If no one claims it in the next few days, you can call the number at the bottom of the form and we'll pick it up again. It's Friday night and I gotta get home to the missus. She'll throw a fit if I'm back before 8. Last time she... all right, concierge snapped. Give it to me. The delivery driver thrust the mobile computer at him. The concierge signed the screen and handed it back. The delivery driver winked. Thanks, he said, and marched through the door. The concierge walked behind the desk and entered the security code into the keypad. To Jack's ears, it sounded like musical notes. The door locked open and the delivery driver left the building. Jack watched him drive off, then he refocused on the concierge. He was back to reading his magazine. So far, so good. Okay, Opie said. It's time. There was a scratching sound. The concierge glanced up for a moment, then continued reading. There was another scratching sound. The concierge put his magazine down and listened. There was again. He stood up and walked around his desk, following the sound, turning his head left and right, trying to locate where the noise was coming from. He paused for a moment, then bent down with his ear to the box. The scratching sound was coming from inside. The concierge continued to listen, unaware a tube had now slid out of the hole in the side of the box was pointed directly at him. A small glass of gas hit him square in the face, and he straightened up with a look of surprise. He staggered sideways against the desk for support. He swayed there for a moment, then stepped behind it and picked up the phone's receiver. He began to dial. Jack's stomach tightened. No. But the concierge stopped dialing and his eyes lost their focus. He rocked backward and collapsed into the chair. The phone slipped from his fingers and clattered to the floor. The concierge gave a final jerk and fell unconscious. Jack stared at Charlie. What was the gas stuff? She grinned. Best you didn't know. We'll have to use that again sometime. Jack focused the binoculars on the box as the tip of the penknife blade poked out, and from the inside, someone cut open the tape securing the flaps. The blade retracted, and after a few seconds, a head with blonde flowing curls popped out and looked around. Frank was only 10, 5 years younger than Jack and Charlie, and the smallest of their urban outlaws. So, she'd been the ideal one to use for this part of the mission. Let's go, Jack said, getting to his feet. Charlie stood and slid the directional microphone into her hardshell backpack. Jack adjusted the camera on his shoulder. Image good? He asked Opie. Yep, I can see everything. Jack glanced up and down the road. CCTV? No one's watching. Jack and Charlie hurried to the front door of the apartment building. Red smiled and waved at them. Charlie waved back. Get a move on, guys, Opie said. Someone might come. Frank climbed out of the box and walked behind the desk. Jack closed his eyes and remembered the precise sounds the keypad had made. The code is 2778355. Ren typed in the numbers. The door buzzed and the lock is disengaged. Jack pushed it open and gestured Charlie through. That was clever, she said. I know. Charlie cocked an eyebrow at him. Captain Modest. They smiled at each other as they marched across the foyer. Good job, Charlie whispered to Rin. Rin rubbed her neck. I thought I was never going to get out. Charlie ruffled her hair. You were brilliant. She turned away and whispered into her mic. Obi, you said the elevator's down this hallway, right? Yep. Charlie looked at Jack. See you there. He nodded. Charlie and Ren jogged around the corner and disappeared from view. Jack opened the door behind the desk, grabbed the back of the chair, and wheeled the unconscious man through. The room beyond was a few square yards. Against the back wall was a small table with a kettle. To the left was a door with a restroom sign. Jack tipped Concierge's head back and checked his breathing. Fortunately, it was steady and strong. Satisfied he'd be okay, Jack slipped back through the door and closed it behind him. He peered around the foyer. No one else was there, so he hurried down the hallway and into the elevator with Charlie and Ren. Charlie had the button panel open, exposing a mess of wires and circuitry. She had a small black box with a digital readout to several of the wires behind the panel, and numbers scrolled down the screen. Now again, now and again, Charlie pressed a button on the device. She glanced at Jack. This is taking longer than I thought. The elevator was locked with the keypad. If they wanted to go to a specific floor, they'd had to hit that floor number and type in the corresponding code. They didn't know the code to the penthouse, which Obi said was changed weekly. Charlie's contractor would find it for them. The only problem was it was random. She had no control over the order in which codes for each floor would come up. Which ones have you got so far? Jack asked her. 7, 1, 2, 6, and 9. Charlie took a breath. None of them close to the top floor. Jack's stomach tightened. Without the code, they wouldn't be going any farther. Why can't we go up the stairs? The cameras in the stairwell are on an isolated security system, Opie said. They're connected to a computer on the ninth floor. We couldn't have turned it off the concierge's desk. No, he only monitors the cameras. He has no control over the main system. Jack and Obi had spent a long time trying to work out how to get past the cameras. There was just no way to reach the computer on the ninth floor and shut down the security system. The only other way to turn off the cameras was to use the override panels in each of the apartments. But breaking into one of them was too risky. They had no way of knowing if people were home or not. If Jack, Charlie, and Ren went up the stairs, the software would detect movement and call the security officers. They would then phone the concierge, and if he didn't answer, the cops would be there in minutes. Jack couldn't help but be impressed with the building's internal security, and had to admit that he liked the challenge it posed. It was almost as if it was daring them to defeat it. Come on, Charlie said through tight lips. The code extractor in her hand beeped through a series of six numbers appeared on the glowing display. Charlie hit a button to save it. Jack looked at her. Penthouse? She shook her head. That was the code for the third floor. Jack had a funny feeling the penthouse would be the last number of the correct, but after another minute, it beeped again. Got it! Charlie reached around the panel and hit the button for the top floor. The doors closed and the elevator started itself. Jack ran through the plan. They had to get to the penthouse, bypass the alarm system, and find the... Suddenly, the lights went out, and the elevator came to a jarring halt. Ren gasped. Jack lifted a flashlight from his belt and skirted on. What's happening? Obi asked. We're in trouble, Charlie said. The elevator's lost power. It's not just the elevator, Obi said. There are random blackouts all over London. Charlie looked at Jack, her eyes wide. The virus? He nodded, and a feeling of dread washed over him. The virus was a sophisticated piece of software that with the potential to cripple any computer. It was their fault that it had escaped the internet, and now it was taking down power stations around London. If they did get to it soon, Jack shuddered at the thought of how much damage the virus could do. They had to get this mission over with as quickly as possible, get back to the bunker, and work out a way to stop the virus. But first, he shone his flashlight at the ceiling. For a few seconds, Jack imagined crawling onto the roof of the elevator. The building was 12 stories high, and they had no climbing gear. Besides, as far as Jack knew, the shaft didn't have a ladder, and even if it did, that one was one risky climb. His stomach nodded. He hated heights. We're with floors, Charlie said, reading his mind. Jack let out a slow breath and shone the flashlight back up to the ceiling again. No other option. There were 9 panels, and the middle one had a latch. He looked at Ren. Think you could unlock that for us? She looked up. Yeah. She seemed relieved at the prospect of getting out of the confined space, even if it was going to be dangerous. Jack cupped his hands in a stirrup for Ren to put her foot in, and he lifted her up. Mind the shoulder cam. He grabbed her legs, keeping Ren steady while she fumbled the latch. After a moment, there was a click, and the center panel swung down. Jack lifted Ren higher. She grabbed the edge of the hatch and crawled onto the roof of the elevator. Charlie was next to the hatch, and once her feet had disappeared, Jack climbed up on the handrail and sprang up, fingers gripping the flame. Slink would have been proud of that move. With effort, Jack managed to haul himself onto the roof of the elevator with the others. He got to his feet and shone his flashlight upwards. The elevator shaft stretched above them, reminding him of the tunnels beneath the city, except went straight up. Jack considered waiting to see if the power would come back on, but that could be minutes or hours. The flashlight beam moved to a set of doors just above their heads. Jack slipped off of his backpack and pulled out a stubby metal bar. He reached up, jammed the bar into the crack, and tried to lever the doors apart. The bar slipped free, and he staggered back. He tried again, but he still couldn't get good leverage on the doors. When Jack failed for the third time, he swore loudly and turned to Charlie. Any ideas? She looked up after a moment. Do you think you could give me a boost to that? She pointed at a flat box on the wall halfway up the 4th floor doors. I think so, Jack said. What is it? It's the control mechanism. When the elevator reaches that level, both sets of doors will open. It's directly connected to the door motors, and I think I might be able to do something with it. She glanced at him. With a bit of luck. You know what you're doing, though, right? Charlie shrugged. Not so much. Brilliant. Of course I do, idiot. Charlie smiled, slipping off her backpack, took out the code extractor, and opened the back of it. She removed the battery and tore out a couple of wires. She placed them between her teeth and nodded at Jack. Jack leaned up against the wall of the elevator shaft and made a stirrup again with his hands. Charlie put her foot in and lifted her up. Guys, Obi said in her ears. What's happening? Trying to solve a problem, Jack said, doing his best to hold Charlie steady. She pulled a screwdriver from her hip bag, undid the cover of the door control, and looked inside. After a moment, she reached in and connected the battery. There was a small spark, and the doors to the elevator shaft opened a few inches. She did it again, and they opened another 5 inches or so. "All right," Charlie whispered. "That's the best I can do without line power." Jack lowered her back down. He reached up again and jammed the bar into the gap of the doors. This time, he got a better grip. He managed, with effort, to open them wide enough through. Jack clawed at the bottom of the door and hauled himself up. He shone his flashlight left and right, checking that no one was around, then hoisted himself over the lip and slid on his belly into the corridor. Next, Jack spun around and held out his hands. Charlie lifted Ren up to him, and he pulled her through. Ren leaped to her feet and pressed her back against the wall, her eyes scanning left and right, straining into the darkness as she kept a lookout. Jack turned back to help Charlie, but she was already sliding out next to him. She stood up and dusted herself off. "Stairs?" Jack shone his flashlight to the left. "This way," he whispered. They silently crept along the corridor, listening for even the faintest sound. At the end of the hallway, Jack opened the door to the stairwell. "We need to move fast," he whispered. "If the cameras came back on, they'd be in trouble." "How long would it take for the security computer to boot back up?" Jack ushered Charlie and Ren through, and the three of them raced up the stairs as fast as they could, only stopping when they reached the door to the penthouse. Catching his breath, Jack wondered how much time they had to make up. "Speaking of which, Obi," he said into his microphone, "how long do we have before the night shift starts and the concierge gets here?" 15 minutes. "What?" Jack looked at Charlie. "We don't have enough time." "Yes, we do." It took Charlie under a minute to pick the lock and open the door. "See?" "Wait," Ren whispered. "How do we know the apartment's empty?" "He's out for the evening," Obi said in their ears. "The Royal Opera House. Won't be back for another couple of hours at least." Jack peered into the penthouse hallway. With the power off, at least they didn't have to bother about the alarm. The three of them hurried inside. Charlie stopped the security box on the wall and cut the main wires. "Just in case the power comes back," she whispered. Jack nodded and followed Ren through the set of doors. The lounge was minimalist, with stark white walls and two black leather sofas facing each other. Apart from that, there was no other furniture.